It's Jurassic James and Jurassic James. We're looking at the Permian Basin. So instead of doing a highlight on one model like I normally do, right now I'm in Seymour, Texas, at the Permian Fest as a speaker for the White House Museum. So this video I thought should be a little different because I'm out of town on a dig and stuff. But I wanted to tell kind of the story of the Permian environment and how I got associated with it and everything. So the idea is that in 1879, basically, Cope and Marsh are out doing the Bone Wars thing, and they find, before finding Dimetrodon skeletons. And the town of Seymour, imagine where, Texas, where Dallas is and Amarillo is, like right in the middle of them is Seymour, Texas. It's kind of a smaller town in Archer County. And so the town was founded in 1879, the same year Dimetrodon was first published. So coincidence? I think not. So my experience with this site is that I worked at the museum. I was a tour guide, and the museum tour guides, they sent the first generation of tour guides on a dig in Seymour. And I was able to dig with Dr. Robert Bacher, a paleontologist, a well-known paleontologist, also David Temple, the curator of paleontology there as well, and a man named Chris Fliss, who I met for the first time on that dig. And so when I was digging there, it was like a 5-day or 3-day dig. It's really kind of fast, kind of an intro, which brings me to the fact of the 3-day rule. It's a general rule in paleontology called the 3-day rule that within 3 days, if you can do it or not. And what I mean is if you're digging in the field for 3 days, after 3 days, people are either like, let's go again, let's keep it happening, or they're like, this is the worst thing ever, I hate it. So that's the thing, and I've seen it, I've taken groups out to dig, and I've seen this is true. So we were digging, and like I said, there are certain things that were fun. Now, for example, as far as the toy world goes, and I've already mentioned these guys before in other videos, Dimetrodon, I think it's one of my first videos, is a carnivorous synapsid. It's found here in Texas, West Texas, or North Texas, sorry, and also found in Germany. We have a Dilophosaurus here, which is, of course, an herbivore, and I do believe a Jurassic World figure of a Dilophosaurus is coming out, but it's probably just a remake of Dimetrodon. There's a little salamander called a Diplocaulus, which we call them boomerang heads for obvious reasons in the name. They're found here in Texas. Occasionally on the intertubes, you'll see someone with a bucket, and what they've done is they've made a model of Diplocaulus, put it in the bucket, and put water on it and go, I found this weird salamander in Texas. Because anyone tell me what it is, it's a model, and they're lying. There's another amphibian called Euryaps, which I have to dig some of these guys' teeth up in later times. And then there's these two freshwater sharks, Orthocanthus and Xenocanthus. Xenocanthus is the most well-known because it's the name of the family and also it's the biggest of them. But in the site in Seymour, we dig up more Orthocanthus. So I'll mention more in a minute. So when I was digging with the museum, what happens basically is there's what's called a spoil pile. And that's where people who've been there like decades ago dug up stuff and got other things and just put their extra bits into a pile. What happens then is you, the newbie, the untested, the untrustworthy, go through that. And that's where you learn bone from rock from caliche. Now caliche is technically under rock and mineral. Caliche is a calcium carbonate. It's like when it dries out. Basically the environment dries out. It'll create these nodules, caliche nodules and stuff. So sometimes people think those nodules are bones, but they're not. I will tell you a fun fact that I have my own brushes and things, but on that first dig we went to the Dollar General and got makeup brushes because some of the bones there are very delicate, so we had to brush with that instead of the actual harder brushes, depending on what we're digging up. Anyway, and so the big deal with this is that we were getting first-hand account, learning with the curators, and it was really great. And I remember it was fun because on my highlight was Dr. Bacher and 4 of the tour guys were digging together. And he was like, this is an area we haven't really looked much in. We found a couple things here. Let's look around. And so we were digging and digging. And my friend of mine said, oh, I can't find anything here. And we switched spots. And then I was digging there, and I found a Dimetrodon tooth. And the general rule I always say is if you can't find, you're digging for a fossil, you want the whole fossil. If you can't find the whole fossil, get the head. If you can't find the head, find a tooth. Because it tells you something. I mean, many dinosaurs like Siamosaurus are known from just teeth. Carcharodontosaurus is known for teeth initially, Spinosaurus too. And so I found this tooth, and I mean, my nickname was Jurassic James. It's been since 2001. But I remember Dr. Bacher listened to me and goes, wow, that's a good find. I'm going to call you Fang. And if you don't know, when I was a kid, I would grow up. There was a show called Paleo World, where these two kids would watch, like they would talk to paleontologists and talk about different things. And I used to watch that show when I was a kid. And I remember the joke, of course, is I would watch it. I would get my dinosaur toys and sit in front of the TV and watch the show. And so Dr. Bacher was a frequent guest on the show, so I was digging with him, who is one of my heroes, and he gave me a nickname, which is like super awesome. And so that means for me the dig was done. I was ready to go home. No, I'm kidding. I was wanting more, but I just got a lot of cool experience. Well, since then, I became the head tour guide at the museum in the staff tour guide program, and part of my job was to train the other tour guides, to be paleontology people. So I would take them on tours and train them all that, write up study guides and everything. But then, of course, I went to my boss and said, look, the way I can do what I do is I've gone places, I've done things, I've dug things, right? And so I convinced them, and we got a budget, and I was going to take the team out on digs, right? And so that's how I connected with, the curator would always be there because the way digging works is that if it's like public land, there's like permits to the government. If it's private land, there's certain deals with the ranch owner or whatever. And so I was able to work with them that way. Since then, I've actually become I work at the museum, but I've become a volunteer at the Whiteside Museum. So when I first went in 2013, they were building it, they were setting everything up. Now the museum is there in Seymour, Texas, and I'm essentially a volunteer there. So I go and dig and hang out with the director, Chris Fliss, and Holly, assistant director, and Miss Laura, who runs the gift shop and business, other parts. So it's a really, and there's more people since then. I met many volunteers like Jacob, really cool guy. He's in college right now. And so I can go there and dig with them and learn new things. And so that's one of the areas where, like, most people vacation. They go to, like, an island and they lay in the sun, or they go to a resort and get massages. I will take vacation time out and go dig and learn cool stuff, basically. So that's my experience with the Permian. And like I said, the Permian Fest coming up where I am right now is a conference. And Chris, I'm a supporter of his museum. He said, hey, would you mind being a speaker? And I was like, sure. So he had me on Saturday and Sunday. And so if you want to know more, JurassicJames.com, or my Instagram, JurassicJames65, and Twitter and Facebook, same, JurassicJames65. I put what I'm doing on those. And so I'm a speaker now, and I'm doing mine on pop culture and dinosaurs. I mean, obviously I like pop culture and dinosaurs, and I'm going to bring some toys. So the idea here is, in this environment, we have these animals, and what's really cool is that post early Permian, late Permian, Triassic, late Triassic, late Jurassic, you see this very similar ecological standard where you have very few carnivores and very many herbivores. So think of Africa, you have the lion, leopard, cheetah, chivets, hyenas, African wild dogs, but then like a lot of ungulates, a lot of hoofed animals like wildebeests and even elephants and rhinos and gazelles and stuff, right? In North America, you have bears and wolves and coyotes and things like that. But you have like a lot of elk and deer and other things, right? Moose. So in the early Permian, we have like there's different species of Dimetrodon, and there's different relatives of them with shorter cells. And so we have these guys and herbivores, and like very few like herbivores by comparison. So it's a very different environment and that's one of the big mysteries about the site in particular. I can't say much about it because of reasons, museum reasons, but in general, that's a really unusual balance. But do remember, this is a cold-blooded environment or ectothermic environment. Everything it's different than what we would see today, where we have mainly warm-blooded animals, being the kind of the movers and shakers, literally. And then there's like crocodiles too, but also there's like lions, So the thing is, we do know that Dimetrodon ate Diplodocus. I've seen like 2 or 3 specimens where the Diplodocus nose was bitten off. They actually bit off the nose because these guys would burrow in the mud. And they were amphibians, like salamanders, and they were in the water, and they have little tiny legs, so they're not like on land running around. So they're in water, swimming around more. So the Dimetrodon may have been digging and trying to pull out the water. Euryalps, this is not the scale. Euryalps, they get pretty big actually. There's one at the museum in Seymour called King James. It's really big Euryalps, and I was like, it's named for me. But it turns out the director, Chris Fliss, his father's name is James Fliss, but I'm pretty sure it's really named after me. So these guys are these like big salamanders, and it's really cool. They have these their name, Euryalps means broad face, and they have these big broad faces, and they have like tiny little teeth, right? And so, I mean, amphibians aren't known for tooth differentiation, and so these guys are, not equal to Dimetrodon, but they're larger, near competitors. But the next thing I want to point out are the sharks. So the orthocanthus these are freshwater sharks, and again, today the only sharks that I'm aware of that are freshwater friendly are bull sharks, which is why the story of Jaws. We see a shark attack on the real story of Jaws. On the coast, and everyone's like, oh, great white. And then they find out there's one like in a bayou upstream. Well, great whites can't go upstream. So they won't survive in fresh water. Only bull sharks can. And so the idea is that we see that today, but in the early Permian, orthocanthus here was a freshwater shark. So in the theater of your mind, imagine that like a bear, and these are salmon, and they're trying to catch them in the water. The spine over the dorsal area. Sometimes the biggest one I've seen is like that big. I found parts of them. I found their teeth have where most sharks have like the V-shaped tooth. They always have like a cusp, basically 2 points. And so the idea is that maybe if a Dimetrodon is like biting down on it, it can stab with the spine. There's this infamous video I think on YouTube where there's a small shark, modern shark in the ocean, and there's some kind of fish that's under the substrate. So the shark is swimming by, the fish grabs like this, and then it spits it out because the spine on this dorsal fin stabs it in the mouth pretty much, and it spits it out, right? And so the Eutychanthes, their spines have like a groove in it where we think the venom would have gone through. Finally, I'm going to point out one last thing on this little thing, this setup, is that Adolphosaurus, this large herbivore. Now, what makes them really different, Dimetrodon, the fells are different shapes. And in fact, this is, if you're wondering, a 2018 Safari, and this is a 2018, same year, Collect A model. So this is like the first accurate Adolphosaurus model I've ever seen. Most of them are just repurposed Dimetrodons. So note that. As an herbivore, has a smaller head than the Dimetrodon, and the sail is not this kind of upside down lowercase u. It's more this kind of outward shape like this, and there's little bumps on the spines. And I asked Chris why their spines have these little bumps there. He said because if they're hiding in forested areas, they kind of blend up the trees, which is really cool. Final thing to point out this though is that we were digging, and the geology is so important because we find these guys mainly in the muddy area. Well, particularly this guy I've experienced. I found I remember on that first day I found a Diplocalus, a bit of a skull. I was like, yay. So they hide in mud. These guys are found near fast-moving rivers. And I remember I was with Dr. Blocker, and I always say personally, Dr. Blocker to me is like Yoda because he speaks in riddles. Whenever I ask him a direct question about something, he will never give me the direct answer. It will always be some kind of walk-around way of looking at it. And so the idea was we were walking around the site, and we were near what was a paleo stream, meaning that it was an ancient river. So we see where there's mud over here, and there's sand, and then there's like pebbles and gravel, meaning the river is moving around through the environment. And we found Adolphosaurus bones there, and not Dimetrodon, and that's one site. And I said, well, what does that mean to us? And Dr. Bacher said, well, think about it. Adolphosaurus has these really big tails. Dimetrodon tails, from what I understand, aren't as big in comparison. And so if a Dimetrodon walks up, the Adolphosaurus will jump in the river and swim away. Meanwhile, Dimetrodon's like, oh shoot, and it'll go to the muddy area and just dig up these guys. And I was like, cool, because every documentary, or at least the YouTube, the shows I see with the kid, would show them chasing these guys down. Now, did they eat Adolphosaurus? Of course they did. But they weren't maybe the main diet, basically. They were looking for eating other things instead. So that's why it was such a cool thing, because for me, as a young person, I was like, I see one thing in books, I read the papers, but when you're in the field, you see something slightly different. And that's why I encourage anyone, if you can, to go on a dig with a museum or a club or something legal, because you can always get more insight on the site. I mean, I can, even the curator of paleontology told me at the museum, he's like, you just know all of this information. I've been reading everything since I was a kid, but the thing is, when you go on the field, you just get more experience, you see more stuff. So this little site here in Texas is really important. I hope if you can come to Permian Fest, I think it's the first time they're doing it. If it's successful, they're going to do it again, maybe every year. And either way it goes, I encourage you, if you're driving up in North Texas, go by Seymour Whitehead Museum. It's a really cool place. And they're opening new exhibits all the time. I will point out that this is a terrestrial environment. You hear Permian, you think about oil, in Texas at least. This is a coastline, it's a floodplain. Imagine going further west. Because today, if you're in Seymour, you should go southeast to go to the water, the Gulf. But here you go west, and you would see the Permian, where sharks like Helicoprion were swimming. Fresh saltwater sharks. And when these guys all died out into the early Permian, they were replaced by the gorgons. So we get to the late Permian, think Listersaurus, not in North America, but Listersaurus, gorgons. In middle Permian, the Moschops, those other animals too. The Theraptids replace these guys. And so it's a really cool spot, really cool area here in Texas, and I encourage you to go by. And if you ever want to go on a field trip with me, comment below, let me know. That being said, I'll see you next week when I'm back in Houston. I'm thinking of doing another unboxing and doing with how to tell certain things with different priests. It'll be great. Just tune in next week.